Hello, hello. We'll get started in a minute. I think there's just a few more people trickling in. The schedule this afternoon is a little tighter, so we should start soon. Okay. All right. So first of all, I want to welcome everyone. Welcome to those who just joined us this afternoon, and welcome back to anybody who was here earlier today, this morning, for the previous session. I hope the people who had lunch enjoyed it, had a little time to be together, also had a little time to be quiet, perhaps. My name is Maxi. I'm the center director at the Krishnamurti Center. And I want to start going off script a little bit and apologizing for two small technical difficulties. One, I am too tall for the mic. I hope you can hear me anyway. And the second one, only some of you might get, but I look a lot like somebody else. Both of those technical difficulties have no solution, so bear with me. All right. I have the pleasure of welcoming Professor Connie to the podium. Her full name and title is Constance Jones, PhD. Connie is an accomplished scholar in the field of sociology of religion, with a special interest in religions of the East and the adoption of their practices in the West. She researches spiritual teachers and new religious movements across the globe. She has a long list of publications to her name, the most recent one on Krishnamurti by the title Krishnamurti, Self-Inquiry, Awakening and Transformation, published by Cambridge University Press. I'm going to go off script for one more second. I don't know about you, but I think that's an awesome title. Probably worth reading. Connie is currently teaching a course on conditioning at the California Institute of Integral Studies. We're therefore very fortunate to have her with us today to share on the topic of conditioning and the individual, or with the title, Inquiries into Conditioning. I just want to mention, in terms of the flow of the next couple of sessions, is that after the presentation, we will have about 10 minutes of Q&A, question and answers. We will try to select maybe one or two questions from the live streaming audience, and then we'll have a couple of questions from the audience here. When we take the questions from the audience, if it was possible, please to line up behind the mic so that we have some order to how we pose the questions and answer them. After the Q&A, we'll have a very short break and we'll switch to a piano recital by our pianist Carolina Carlo. So please do stay for that. One request from the pianist is that she has a few pieces that are separate pieces, but she would prefer that we don't applaud her and clap for her in between the pieces, just so that we can maintain a nice atmosphere. She will let us know when she's done, and at that point, obviously, we can show our gratitude. All right. So with no further ado, Professor Connie, the podium is yours.
Thank you. So we're going to try to have the right volume. So it's all good? Thank you. I was asked to speak in the spirit of Krishnamurti. So what I have done is prepare 6 or 7 questions. So they're inquiries that come to me when I think about what is conditioning, how should I look at conditioning, how is conditioning important in my life. But I would like for this to be a shared inquiry if possible. So I would hope that you would interrupt me. I'm not going to be, well, I will be looking. I'll see, maybe I'll see you. Just raise your hand if you have another inquiry to add. But I will show you the 6 or 7 inquiries I've come up with. And it's called the overview. They're very simple questions. What is conditioning? What is a second-hand human being? What is the problem with conditioning? Does everybody read this? Yes. How does conditioning lead to identification? Does conditioning shape perception as well as cognition? Is unconditioning possible? And lastly, kind of the most important thing, how are awareness and attention essential for deconditioning? So these are my 7 questions, and I hope you will add to them. And we can use the last few minutes of my time to talk about questions that you have about the topic. And then we'll also have questions later, I understand from the announcement. So, what is conditioning? I have used a definition given to us by Professor Krishna, which I'll read. Conditioning is the tendency of the human brain to operate repetitively through memory. It includes biological conditioning, instincts, cultural and religious conditioning, traditions, and other acquired habits of mechanical thought and action. I think conditioning is not that mysterious to us. It's pervasive. It's everywhere, all the time. Starting from DNA, I think, certainly coming through intrauterine memory and stimulus response throughout our whole lives. In fact, we call conditioning, in sociology, we would call it socialization, wouldn't we? It's where you reward and punish people, children, and try to encourage the behavior you'd like and disparage the behavior you don't want. So conditioning is always with us. Kay talks about his preparation of the body over time, over generations, over lifetimes, to prepare a pure body to receive a certain kind of consciousness. We hear about that in Eastern ideas, Eastern lore. And Kay had this understanding that you could purify a body over various lifetimes and therefore have a different notion of, well, I mean, it may be the very notion that's behind the caste system, that if you keep a caste pure long enough, then they can be accepted into heaven for all of us. We'll all benefit. So DNA, collective unconscious, tribal ancestry, there are all kinds of ways in which we're conditioned. And the conditioning assures us that we don't get the whole big picture. I was brought up in the South, a white woman in the South, right during Jim Crow. So it was a huge stamp on my conditioning. I was also brought up in a teetotaling Protestant household. That also has its bearing even today. So my conditioning my early stamp was very important for what I am today. We have another term for conditions. It's called influences. And we understand that we are influenced all the time. I notice now more than ever how I'm being influenced by the media and how I'm not quite sure about anything I say because I heard it from the media. I heard recently, in fact, I saw Joan Baez saying that she had terminal cancer, but she doesn't. So somebody had made this tape and put it on Facebook or whatever I was watching, and I was just scrolling through and I saw that. So we all now are aware that we are being influenced by things that aren't necessarily legitimate and certainly can't be verified. So it's very important to be wise about what influences we choose. And so I think choosing less and less television and movies might be the answer. Or at least be selective. One other point I'd like to make is that conditioning affects body and mind and emotions. So I'm conditioned, if you threaten me, I'm conditioned to get very sleepy. If you say something really bad about my ego, I'll start yawning. And I see that. And I don't know where it comes from, but I see it. I see it in myself. It's a surefire response. So that's one of the ways in which we can examine and observe what we do that's conditioned upon having certain stimuli come into our lives. So body, mind, and emotions are pretty important. I think we're all kind of in for a heavy dose of a pretty fast ride with AI and how we're going to be conditioned by that as well. So that's a good enough definition for conditioning at the moment. Then, what is a second-hand human being? This is a note from Krishnamurti. We have lived on what we have been told, either guided by our inclinations, our tendencies, or compelled to accept by circumstances and environment. We are the result of all kinds of influences, and there is nothing new in us, nothing that we have discovered for ourselves, nothing original, pristine, or clear. He kind of catches it, doesn't he? I mean, he just can get it in a nugget there. So inwardly, we accept the authority, the tyranny even, of the people around us. And this is another thing I've noticed from my childhood in the South, is it was very, very, very important what other people said to you and what they thought of you. And what you thought about what they thought was extremely important, even though it might be way off base. So we bear this twisted trajectory of what's around us and what gets presented to us. And consequently, we accept these things. And that's what a second-hand human being is. Inwardly accepting the authority, the tyranny of another to control what you think you are and what you do, how you move, how you look at yourself. We accept norms for being a respectable person. And even more so, as Krishnamurti says, we have these images of ourselves. And the image is a second-hand person because it's not the real person. And we have a second-hand person in another that we interact with. So one image interacts with another image. We know what a second-hand human being is because we, somewhere along the line, did not understand what critical thinking was. Maybe after we started doing critical thinking, we can see, at least in other people, what it's like to be a second-hand person. There's a new phrase since 1977 called drinking the Kool-Aid. Do you remember that? It means you buy what's been told to you. So I hope we're not drinking the Kool-Aid very much today. All right, so the next slide, what is the problem of conditioning? So we've talked about conditioning, and I should say there are some good things about conditioning. I can tie my shoelaces, I can wash my dishes, I can comb my hair without being conscious of any of that. And I suppose it's our choice as to whether we think that is advisable or not. Because I can tie my shoelaces and be working on a geometry question at the same time. So am I saving myself any work if I try to do two things at once? I don't know. I think that's an interesting inquiry to carry forward. So what is the problem? Conditioning leads to acceptance of what we are told, but we must learn about ourselves from ourselves. Then we'll not be second-hand human beings. So we know from Krishnamurti 25,000 times, we can only learn about ourselves from ourselves. That's the only way it can be done. And we have to learn for ourselves, through ourselves. It's both a birthright, that is, we are able to do this, which other animals may or may not be, but we certainly are. So it's our birthright, but even more than that, it's our responsibility to figure out who we are, I think. So the birthright and the responsibility for being human, I think, is very important. We also know that we had this discussion before about what is knowledge. I think Krishnamurti said knowledge is given to us through memory. And so he didn't like knowledge as much as the accumulated knowledge we talked about from the stage in the last hour. But there's also the whole question of knowledge being the memory of experience. He also says that you just remember that you had this experience, and that's knowledge. Whereas really understanding comes from instantaneous, in the moment awareness. Very, very different from being channeled through thought and memory as opposed to being seen in the moment. So this whole question of conditioning means that it leaves us in the past, either consciously or unconsciously. Even if we're conscious of a memory, I should say aware of a memory, to use the term properly. Even if I'm aware of a memory from the past, I can be conscious of something else in the moment. I can be present to tying my shoes, or vice versa. So the question is, where does the past intercede to disallow me an experience of the present moment? And we know that, well, I know that I live in my memories a great deal of the time. I live in my cacophonous thoughts that are strung together only by my passive attention, which I think is very important. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So Krishnamurti doesn't use the word knowledge in a very beneficial way unless he has the word self in front. So then he talks about self-knowledge, which is something we really should be prone to understanding and searching for. Self-knowledge is important because it's the way in which we ask questions and inquire. It's the way we discover ourselves. The learning of self, learning about self in an unconditioned situation. Okay. Now, the next one is, how does a conditioning lead to identification? This is hard because we're always living in identification. What is that? We look only at the projections we have made of ourselves. Each of us has an image of what we think we are or what we should be. And that image, that picture, entirely prevents us from seeing ourselves as we actually are. So the whole idea is that we identify. We have a me and a mine. In fact, we have multiple me's and multiple minds. And we attach to that identification. And when I'm in that identification, my perspective, my motive, everything is limited about me. I can't have an expansiveness. I can't move toward the unlimited. So I come to you as a Southern woman of a certain age, or whatever I come to you as. So that's my identity. And we have to learn how identities are problematic and how being attached to identities can also be problematic. We can find ways in which we can observe ourselves outside of identification. That's what I think is being called for when we try to understand seeing ourselves. When Krishnamurti says, perceive yourself, observe yourself, see yourself, I think he's talking about seeing yourself outside identification. So you don't look at yourself as the farmer, as the college professor, as the AV expert. You look at yourself as the observer, which brings all kinds of other questions, such as, who is observing? Who is it that's not in identification that is observing this person who is trapped in identification? That may be the key to unlocking our observations that lead to self-knowledge. So we find identity is a limitation and awareness of me and mine. And Krishnamurti wrote a great deal about what's me and what's mine. And to step outside of what's me and what's mine can lead us to an observation that is pure and supposedly limitless. And it shows us how we cling to images of ourselves. I was asked to do an exercise last week, and what I was trying to do was, when someone presented me with something that was shocking, I was going to stop and not immediately respond, because my normative order says I should respond quickly. I should be sharp and quick and fast. So I said, okay, I'll give it 90 seconds. So somebody shocked me by giving me some bad news, and instead of responding, I was silent for 90 seconds, which is a long time when you're in interaction with someone. But what I saw several layers in myself of a response pattern, even with the script, down to the very words that were associated with the identification of Connie as this or Connie as that. I saw one set of responses. They were actually reactions, not responses. Then I went a little bit deeper. After about 40 seconds, I saw another set of responses. These are conditioned responses based in identification that are autonomic. They're automatic unless something bothers. It takes the time to intercede and stop the automaticity of the response. I hope that somebody can relate to that. So we rarely ask ourselves, who is this self that responds? But this might be a good time to look at that, to see what is it that lies sort of in striations, in layers, that has been identified and concretized. It's been crystallized in my identification of self. So rarely do we look outside of identification, but I think that's what the name of the game is for this observation. So next slide. Does conditioning shape perception as well as cognition? I think you know, well, maybe I'll read it first. Conditioning is the factor of division. To live peacefully in this world, let us be free of conditioning. Cease to be Muslim or Hindu. This is the factor of intelligence, becoming aware that one is conditioned, then seeing the effect of that conditioning in the world, the divisions, nationalistic, linguistic, and so on, which is pretty obvious today, and seeing that where there is division, there is conflict. When you see this, when you are aware that you are conditioned, that is the operation of intelligence. So Krishnamurti is now introducing us to a new notion, which is that maybe this observer that sees this trapped little person who's identified as so-and-so, you and your profession, that person is operating with an intellect which is not intelligence. So he distinguishes between what I would call a lower mind and a higher mind. And there is a higher mind. And maybe the observer, that's not limited at all, is part of this higher mind that we need to understand. Because normal encounters with reality are never pure or crystal clear. They're not neutral. We always have biases, and the biases are so built in that we barely even recognize them. And as Bohm said very clearly, when we don't look at these assumptions that we make, the assumptions will do the seeing instead of ourselves. And that bears some thinking about, because when you can imagine that you assume that this person you see has these characteristics, and that person and those characteristics would be beneficial or harmful, and you act on that assumption, it could be very problematic. You could make a misjudgment and perhaps harm someone. So it's very interesting, I think, to unpack the assumptions that we all live with, because we live with a bundle of them. And they come through conditioning, and the question is how to observe them and see them. Bohm says that there's a thing called proprioception of thought, in which we actually can see how our thinking is working. It's just like proprioception of the body. I know that I'm standing here because I feel it. I feel the proprioception of the physical body. But there could also be proprioception of thought, in which case I can see why I'm thinking and how I'm thinking, which is very important to see conditioning, because the first propensity we have is when we consider conditioning is to say, oh, well, this is what I do. I act too quickly. I make judgments too fast. I'm not patient with my child. So all of those things you associate with habitual movements in yourself, but that is not understanding conditioning. That's just making a list of things that are resulting from conditioning. It's just the same old story of using the self as a referent. It's not this. We have to move outside the self in order to get to the observation that I think Krishnamurti is trying to introduce us to. And Patik is going to talk about the self in great detail later. The point I'm trying to make with this slide is that perception, which is this seeing that we're talking about, and thinking, which is the way we conceptualize things, both of those are pervaded by conditioning. So I'll see different colors from you. I'll observe different genders. I'll look at clothes and you might not. So even our very perceptions and the way in which we perceive are colored by extremely conditioned. Yeah. So the separation of perception and cognition, seeing versus thought, is an interesting way to see how conditioning works, because it's the seeing of the seeing that is the important thing, I think, Krishnamurti is talking about. How we can learn about yourself from yourself. Is unconditioning... Oops. There we go. Is unconditioning possible? Oh. What did I do? Well, on my screen, this is what's here. It's the next one after.
That one is Mary Kerr's one.
Oh,
Let me see.
there it is.
Hold on. But you're not showing it anymore. Let me see. Something happened.
This is the last
Yeah,
one.
but look at that. Look
Yeah.
at that.
Oh,
Let me see.
then I don't have a clue.
Okay, hold on. Maybe play. Oh, where is the... Oh, here.
You're perfect. You're wonderful. You're wonderful.
I don't know what I did.
Thank you. Okay. So the last slide, I think. Let me see. Did I just do the one before? Is unconditioning possible? I didn't do that. So I'm going back one. Okay. In response to a question about providing an educational program for a boy, Kay said, and he, direct words, "I have no ideal. I want that boy to grow so intelligent that he will meet everything as he grows. So I want to uncondition the boy from me, from my society, from my culture, and all the rot that is going on." I didn't think Krishnamurti would talk about unconditioning, but he did. So it's very important that we understand what he meant by that. And he goes on in his book on education, several books, to talk about what is needed in an educational scheme to allow for deconditioning or unconditioning. He mentions a lot of things: trust, lack of fear, a mentor relationship with a teacher, a sense of harmony. He talks about beauty, inner strength, personal relationships that can be called upon for support. He goes into a lot of different things, all of which were considered in the creation of the school that we're in now. So these show that only with these requirements met can one see oneself, according to Krishnamurti. Seeing oneself outside of conditioning is really not holding yourself in opposition to conditioning, because that would be setting up division in the mind. So it's not, I must do this. I must never eat the strawberry shortcake again. That doesn't help. but much better to see where does the desire for the strawberry shortcake come from. So seeing in the moment the apparatus of conditioning and how it functions, and not setting oneself against oneself, saying there's some part of me that wants and a part of me that doesn't want. So it's the seeing itself, without judgment or desire to change, that perhaps is the transformative element that perhaps makes the change possible. And I've already mentioned that not becoming aware of one's proclivities and foibles, that's not this whole question of unconditioning. That's just relisting the elements that the self is already committed to. So we need this new quality of attention, of perception, awareness, that's really not organized around the self at all, because the self is filled with notions of me and mine. So now we move to the next slide. There we go. So this is the final one. How are awareness and attention essential for deconditioning? This comes from something that I put together, so I've just cited myself, but I'll just read it to you anyway. To discover and then cultivate an attention that opens to an awareness that is pure and empty of the contents of the mind. I forgot to mention that one of the things Krishnamurti emphasizes is that how we can see the need for deconditioning is to use 3 of our standbys: silence, stillness, and spaciousness. And I find that when I remember those 3, I can come to a different state in myself, and I can see more about myself. And here he mentions the pure and the empty mind. To gain insight into one's own consciousness through direct perception of one's bondage to habitual modes of existence. I see more and more of that as I spend more time in silence and stillness. And to observe what is going on in one's awareness requires a disciplined attention. More about that. To see directly the delusions that identification with ego and self produces. Now, to go back to attention, I would say attention is almost miraculous, because what it does is it connects levels of reality. It connects the outer world that I experience with an awareness in myself. If I can be disciplined in attention, I can see more and more. Perception expands. It might even become limitless. But that perception is always outside of identification and conditioning. It's very important to see that that's the attention that I want to foster. The other attention is the one I don't want to foster. The attention that is active, that has a focus, that looks, is the one I want. Passive attention, unfortunately, is where I usually live. It's the attention that just watches whatever comes across the screen. Like a television, you just sit there and watch whatever comes on. That's basically what I do in most of my life, and we find other people do too. Just whatever calls to me, I'm taken to it. I'm taken through it. It is me. I'm absorbed by it. There's no independent observer. So the passive attention is what we want to disparage, and the active attention of, oh, I can see something about myself now, is what we want to encourage. Okay. And then Kay also mentions meditation. He talks about the religious mind. He talks about a lot of ways in which awareness and attention can be fostered. And here is where we would also go back to Boehm's proprioception of thought. again, I think the notion of the higher intelligence being connected to the lower intellect in the mind comes through this giving some time and attention to stillness, silence, spaciousness. Well, I wonder if anyone here has an experience of deconditioning that you would like to share with us. Yes.
Should I use the microphone? Thank you. I resonate with so much of what you were speaking about. I have a very established meditation practice, and I've been reading and studying Krishnamurti for about 20-something, maybe 25 years. And lately, I'm experiencing some really tumultuous stuff in my life, you know, like external, familial difficulties that have been in moments extremely immediate and acute. And I have recognized how resting, as you are describing your experience of going through layers of conditioned responses, resting in the immediate experience, there is a container that is broader than our narrow, reactive self, which tends, I think, to be what we would call the conditioned self. And I'm interested also, well, to talk specifically about my experience. My brother almost attacked me, and then I had on another front, another relational wipeout where I was really able to work with this stuff and was not. I felt the experience of being shuddered, but I wasn't shuddered. It was an observational encounter. So it's not that you don't have the experience. You have a different relationship to the experience because the faculty of observation has developed to the point where the experience has a container. And the container is beyond your ego. It is beyond what you call you. And if I may, I would like, if possible, to expand on the you said autonomous and then you said automatic, and I think they're really interesting because they go together in some way. And I would like to inquire about your experience of the autonomic, constellated, almost in a Jungian sense, the autonomic forces that tend, I believe, to have an automatic quality when the externals and the internals meet. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Completely. Thank you. I want to thank you very much for saying that that what we have is not a different experience, but a different relationship. You nailed it. That was so important. I'm going to use that in the future because you said the container is beyond the ego. That's so true. And I don't know that Kay explains what is this container, what is this observer. In the East, in Hinduism, Buddhism, sometimes even Taoism, it's called the witness. It's a consciousness that is able to perceive a great amount, maybe even limitless perception. the point is that it's not muddled, it's not cluttered by anything that is ego-related or even self-related, even objective notion of what myself is. It's just not there because it's perceived in an emptiness. I have had an experience like that. Not very many, but I've had it. And it's, and it's just from nowhere. I mean, I'm not anywhere when I'm having that experience. And I wasn't on drugs, so I was just, but I was perceiving so clearly. Yeah, so thank you for that. Now the question was the relation of automaton to automatic. Yeah. Well, I think the majority of the time, the way I live, I'm an automaton. You know, I'm an old person, so I know exactly what's needed when I go to the Safeway. I know what's needed when I walk the dog. Nothing's new. And as Kay says, I'm just a second-hand person. I'm just doing, you know, going through the rote exercise of my life. And it's when a shock comes, like your brother, a shock comes, you kind of wake up for a second. And that's what I tried with that 90-second thing that was really, really interesting. Because I think we're all oriented around trying to make sure we don't get shocked. I just want to be, I want to be comfortable, so leave me alone, don't shock me. And I'll even say this to myself, oh, I didn't really forget that, I'll be fine. So I've got this inner dialogue going on, mollifying myself, yeah. I think it's called the disease of self-calming, which is a terrible disease. Anyway, so, yeah, but I'm good at it. So, but I think the whole idea of being, we are, I mean, how many times would you say you're an automaton? I'm just doing it because I know how to do it. And it doesn't have to be conscious. So I think the whole question of making something conscious, meaning bringing a real awareness to it, is maybe the question for everyday life. It's not that you have to provide a new way to wash the dishes, but to be aware of washing the dishes, I think, is the name of the game. So, thank you so much. That was wonderful. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Does anyone else have a story? I see someone approaching. Hark. Yeah. Are you going to? You're going to take over now.
Yeah, maybe Connie, you sit down and
Okay.
take some questions. Would
Okay.
that be right? Yeah. I think we naturally progressed into the Q&A section. So if anyone has questions they would like to pose to Connie, please do line up at the mic over there in the middle. We're also going to take a couple of questions from our online audience. Okay, I'll start with a question from the streaming audience. It goes like this. If you please can elaborate...
No, you have to go slower.
Yes.
Could you please?
Yes.
Okay.
If you please can elaborate and explain what J.K. meant when he said to David Bohm, mind is before the brain.
Well, you know this is an impossible task for me, little old me, to interpret J. Krishnamurti, but I'll try. That hasn't kept me down before. I think he was... I also teach a course on consciousness studies, and I'm just reading about what's going on in the studies of consciousness. I could summarize by saying that at the forefront of science, which I don't understand in the least, there's this whole notion that before everything was consciousness, before the mental, even before the mind, and certainly before the physical. If that were the case, then the mind would be before the brain. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
So.
Yeah. The second question that came through, I doubt if deconditioning is possible through verbal teaching. Any comments?
Well, I do too. I doubt it. I think deconditioning, I don't think it should be the goal, deconditioning. I think the goal should be to recognize the conditioning, to see how it changes when I recognize it. Just as he said, maybe it'll be the end of it if I really see it. Just see it without judgment, without any intention to change it, without setting the force of my will against it. Do I see that it changes? But if it doesn't, if it stays, if I still remain whatever I was before, then I can live with that because I can see it as one of many identities. I can see that it's not me. I can see there's a person behind it, an observer. That, to me, relativizes the importance of the conditioned self. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's no longer the absolute truth. It can't be. So if it isn't the absolute truth, then it's one among many. And if it's one among many, then I can deal with it. It doesn't have, it's not due absolute control. It doesn't merit it.
Thank you. I think we have a little bit of time, so let me read one more question from the streaming audience. Kay says, "You are not different than your conditioning."
You are not what?
You are not different than your conditioning. Who is the you who will observe your conditioning? Question mark.
That's the big question, I think. I mean, I don't think he deigns to talk about who that person is, but outside of conditioning, there is, I would say, the higher intelligence. Maybe we have faculties we don't understand, which are related to these vistas of being able to see things we can't see. We do know that we can't see much when we're identified. I'm identified as this or that. I'm a professor, I'm a sociologist. I can't see a lot of things. But if I step outside that identification, I can see more. And I can see the limitation of the identification, and I can see the relativization of it. So I gain a larger vista. Now, what is that person? In different traditions, that person has a lot of names. It's called a soul in some traditions. In some traditions, it's called I am. In some traditions, it's called I. And I also study esoterics schools, and they have another name. They call it the I am. So, giving it a name doesn't help, does it? But there are names for it, because there have been people throughout history in both the East and the West who have tried to identify what is this faculty that is able to observe the relativized self and the identified person and see beyond it. And so, does that make any sense?
Yes, I think so. Thank you. I see we have a couple of members in the audience now that have questions, so let's proceed, please.
Less of a question and more of an appreciation of you. The space you have about studying and trying to feel your way through the central messages of many different paradigms of consciousness, that is so refreshing to find. And it puts so much consciousness oxygen in your credibility. Because, and that's what I wanted to ask, a simple question. You're a paradigmist in a way, I could put it that way. Is there one paradigm of all this kind of topic that you resonate with most? I'm just curious if there is one that kind of raises to your level of spacious resonation.
Well, you've elevated me perhaps invalidly.
I don't think so, but it's okay.
The things that I keep returning to, I can't say that I would rank all these but you're right, I do collect paradigms. That's my job. I love it.
Yes.
I've been doing it for a long time. I think the esoteric paradigm, because I'm now studying some actually mystical esoteric books in the Tibetan tradition. in the Tibetan tradition before Buddhism came, in the Bun tradition. And I find a resonance with a lot of what Krishnamurti says, and also a resonance with many fields. There's shamanism, there's animism, there's theism, there's atheism, there's, I mean, really, there's energy work. These people were way ahead of us a long time ago. And so to see one system that has all of that in it, a chemistry and a physics and a cosmology, it's just tantalizing is what it is. But I'm not sure that it helps me with understanding myself, but maybe one day it will.
Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, please.
Beautiful presentation, very insightful. My question is, we go through the unconditioning process that Kay talks about. I'm wondering, has he touched upon, as all of us as divine beings, we have an innate disposition towards something. Could be towards, I might find reading, for instance, or doing business or whatever. So I'm just wondering if you could comment on, as you go through the unconditioning, is the idea then to identify what your innate disposition is?
What's your what?
Innate disposition
Oh,
is.
innate, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's my question.
Well, I mean, that's what the Gita says. The Gita says we're not all the same.
Yes.
Some people think, some people feel, some people move, right? So you're either you're a karma yogi or a bhakti yogi or whatever the one I didn't mention was. Anyway, the point is your predisposition, isn't that still relative to your life, your fleeting life? It's not the eternal. It's not there are different levels, aren't there? And so if we're talking the eternal level, and I don't think Krishnamurti talks about it, he doesn't give a name to it, does he? He says God quite a few times, but it's usually disparaging, because you make up your God and you give him attributes, and there you have it. Yeah. But then at some point he did say something like, behind that is something eternal. So I think and I'm a student, I'm just a beginning student of the non-dual traditions, but I do believe that's what they would say. I know that's what Shankaracharya would say. You got to look at the real,
Right.
everlasting, unchangeable, and then you got to look at the changeable.
Right.
And this one is going to be gone in a few years. It's just going to be gone. It won't exist. But this one will last. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. I mean, that's Advaita.
I think we have to do that in a way. If we were to invest everything in this, we would be in trouble. You got to remember this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Yes.
Hey, Connie, thank you
Hi.
for your perspective.
Honey.
I just wanted to ask about your opinion on what is the role of a transpersonal experience or mystical experience for a person to come to know their true self. Especially because if you study Krishnamurti in a dogmatic way, you see that in many instances he's shunning away from any practice and any experience. But at the same time, in my personal experience, I've seen that there is a wealth of information in that transpersonal experience or mysticism. What is your take on it?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't fathom what he was talking about, but I do know what he said about experience. And he said experience gets turned into memory, and it's unreliable. I know that was very clear. He was very clear about that. So, but on the other hand, I have had some mystical experiences, and they beckon me. They assure me that there's another reality other than this craziness I'm into now. So I think I trust those experiences. I think it's a mistake to want to repeat them every day, because they are what we call peak experiences. But they give us an idea of what consciousness can be like. Consciousness doesn't have to be monkey mind, which we all know very well. Is that clear? I mean, does that make any sense to you? Is there any reason why you would mistrust mystical experience other than what Krishnamurti said about experience leading into memory?
Not at all. It's just that we don't have it in our culture as something that we do often. And we were mentioning shamanic traditions or ancient Eastern traditions, they did have it. So they could see it, this window, not every day, or perhaps every day, but they had this window. And I think that the window perhaps it's closing on us.
Well, I think we've definitely cut off the capacities that we used to have as humans in the last 350 years, don't you? We just don't recognize those capacities, whereas they live in indigenous societies. Very, very important. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Hi, Connie. You're very cool, by the way. I just want to say that. Connie is cool. My question is around the role of relating and relationship in deconditioning, because I was just thinking about an experience I had actually at lunchtime with some new friends, and somebody asked me about a transformative experience that I'd had and asked me if it had made my life any better or happier. And my conditioned usual be to know and to jump in and give a really informed answer, and I didn't. I actually found myself being sort of sucked up into the sky almost, and took some time, and things came forward that I hadn't even integrated or thought about before. So it was a really beautiful experience of deconditioning, I think. But then I was thinking about the role of the people involved, right? That I was able to have that experience through what was being afforded through the relationship as well, through the relating between myself and this really cool gentleman that I met. And it made me think about something you just were speaking to about, Martin Buber spoke about I, it, and I, thou relating. And that I suppose when you are afforded the opportunity to relate with someone in an extremely loving way, it seems to allow for something to happen that wouldn't happen before, which might be what Krishnamurti was saying, was speaking to in some ways. What the environment allows for the deconditioned response to happen. So I wondered if you had any thoughts about relationship.
Well, I think relationship is key, and it's certainly what Krishnamurti uses. He said you learn everything through, doesn't he say that? You learn everything through relationship. And then it's not only the relationship between you and me, but the parts of myself are in relationship. Some part of me is seeing another part of me or considering another part of me. And that's where I can see some of the conflict he talks about. That's where I can see some of the violence he talks about. When he says, "You're violent, Connie," what could he possibly mean? Because I'm perfect, But
me too.
Maybe he means I'm violent toward myself, and I start out that way, and I've noticed that actually. So I think relationship is like in sociology we call it a form. It's a form that you can lay on interpersonal, you can lay it on personal, you can lay it on intrapsychic, you can lay it on interspecies, because I have a great relationship with my dog. So it's a way in which we can discern something about self, because the other is the mirror. I mean, the Buddhists use this and say, "I am your mirror," meaning I'm going to show you something about yourself you'll never know if I'm not here.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, Connie. Yeah, we have one more? Okay.
Yeah.
If you can make it short, please. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So my question is do you think we are conditioned to ask questions and answer questions, because of that conditioning stops us living a life as it is?
Yeah, I think we're conditioned not to change. And you ask me a question, I answer it, that's the end of it. Right?
Yeah. I feel like very asking questions about creates another movement of life which creates a conflict in living a life as it is also somewhere.
Yeah, I think we're conditioned to do a lot of crummy things, yeah. But certainly, it goes back to this whole thing about feeling comfortable. I think to struggle or to have a little friction, which all esoteric traditions say can lead to something transformative. You got to see it. It's not, everything's not a piece of cake. The longer you say it's a piece of cake, the less you're going to see about yourself. So.
Just last, I want to add something my friend, she just mentioned something, and like in relationships especially, you keep learning again and again, there's like two partners, right? They keep bringing situations again and again, and you keep understanding about yourself all the times, but there has to be some end to the understanding, right? It keeps going, coming back in circles, right? So what do you say about that? Like, there's no end, right? Like, because people,
I don't think so. I mean, in religious studies, there's this huge statement about your God today should not be your God tomorrow. In other words, you should learn something today that will give you a different outlook for tomorrow.
And then forget about it.
Yeah.
Again.
So you're just not the same person today that you were yesterday, I hope. And I hope I'm not either. So my idea of what is the goal in life should be different because I'm more mature today. Yeah.
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
No
Thank you.
questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
We're going to transition now. We're going to have Carolina Kahlo do her piano recital. I do want to read a small nugget that is meant to be a bridge to the next session before we go there. And it reads like this. If conditioning is not merely something the self has, but it is deeply involved in what the self is, then the next question becomes unavoidable. What is the self? Not as a theory, but as this actual, lived, felt sense of being a me that observes, thinks, and experiences. Where does it come from? And what is it? And what happens when it appears? So just to tuck away for the next session, Carolina will play some music for us. I mentioned earlier, please refrain from applauding until she's completely done, because she has a few separate pieces that she would like to play in a continuous manner. Yes. Applause for Connie. And by the way, Connie, I wanted to say that you are perfect.
Oh, good. I'm glad you caught that.